Thank you, everyone, for downloading this episode of the Nerdball Podcast. I am your host, Lorenzo Melcher, coming to you live from my parents' basement, as I have been the past 2 months or whatever. Thank you all for downloading, liking, sharing, subscribing to the podcast. It fills my heart to know that all of you out there continuing to help support the podcast. Don't forget about the YouTube channel. Is it weird, Scott, that I'm staring at the camera right now?
It feels like you have a teleprompter behind me right now, so that's why I keep thinking back there.
This is new. I'm doing the beginning, actually at the beginning and at the end of the podcast, so that's why Scott is sitting here listening. I just thought it was funny because it does seem that way, doesn't it? I'm just out staring.
Right.
So again, thank you all for always doing whatever you can to help the podcast. Check out the YouTube page. I am slowly losing the battle to my son as far as subscribers are concerned. He keeps creeping up on me, so he's less than 100 behind me. So please, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, hit the bell for there on YouTube. And if you want to reach the show through email, it's thenerdballpodcast@gmail.com. That is all I have. Thanks again to all of you, and we'll start the show.
Hi, I'm Scott Buker, and this is the Nerdball Podcast.
This is the Nerdball Podcast with Lorenzo Melcher.
Scott Buker, as always, I feel like you bail me out when I need,
I
need someone, and you're here.
Well, today was in jeopardy because we are currently a single-car family.
I was going to ask you, you rolled up, and I was like, oh, what's
not my car.
Yeah.
That's my wife's.
Yeah.
I took my car in on Friday just kind of for the routine oil change and told the mechanics, hey, it's shaking a little bit when I get a little higher speeds, like anything above 50. Can you just check that out for me? And they said, yeah, absolutely. And they called me back a few hours later. And, about $1,500 later, they're like, yeah, you need some work, including tires. We're shocked your tires haven't fallen off. So, yeah, the car's in the shop. Should be ready hopefully on Monday. So,
are you a car? And now when I say a car person, that doesn't mean like you know everything about cars, but like if anything's wrong, you just go, someone else can handle it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I know nothing about them, and I don't try to.
Yeah.
I've in my old Jeep, that Cherokee I had, I could change the battery and do that type of stuff, but I can't even get to the battery in my Jeep I have now. And honestly, I just don't have the time.
There's no bandwidth for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, to figure that stuff out anymore. So I just take it in and the people I have look at it, I got some trust in that they're not, taking advantage of the situation. So
that's what I was gonna say. I found a good mechanic when I had my old truck where I could go and he would tell me like, all right, you need brakes, but you only need front. You don't need rear.
Right.
Or yes, this caliper's going out, but you probably still got another year or something like.
Yeah.
And I feel good because by him telling me that, he's getting less business, right? So I feel like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. Also, sometimes I say, well, I have the money, just do all of them right now.
Right. So I had a great story. This is actually one of my all-time favorite stories about cars. So back with my old Jeep, that two-door Cherokee I had, which, at this point, this is about probably around 2014, 2015. I was still driving this Jeep with like 250,000
miles
on it.
What year was it?
It was a 2000.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Jeep Cherokee, two-door. Also, like that box Jeep, what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
About like 250,000 miles on it. It was great. But I knew there was a lot of stuff wrong with it. But all I was doing was literally driving from my house to work every day.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I think I had just started being the athletic director at the junior high. So I was traveling a little bit more, for it. And then, when it didn't handle speed very well on the highway. So I'd borrow Lindsay's car if I had to travel a little bit. But anyways, kind of same situation. I needed an oil change on it. So I took it to I don't want to say these places' names on air, but I took it to a more, widely known, type of mechanic shop. I said, hey, I need an oil change. But listen, I know there's a bunch of stuff wrong with this car. Can you just take a look at it for me and let me know what are the essential things that need to be fixed for it?
Yeah.
Knowing that I only use it to drive 1.5 miles down the road every single day. And so they said, no problem. And so they called me back a few hours later, like, yeah, you weren't kidding. There's stuff wrong with it. And I was like, okay, well, like, and they rattle off everything that's wrong with it. I'm like, okay, what are like the essentials, just to be safe?
I needed to keep going.
Yeah, that's it right there.
There you go,
That's
yeah.
what that looks identical to what my car was. Yeah, 2-door Jeep Cherokee.
Yep.
Yeah, the tires didn't ride as high on that one though. I have a picture of it on my phone still actually, because I love this car. Had that since I was 16 in high school, and drove it all the way till, like I said, about 2014, 2015, right around there. Maybe even later, maybe even 2016.
You and Trey have very similar. I don't know if they were the exact same year, but I feel like he had a white one.
He's a 4-door.
4-door.
Yeah,
okay,
mine was a 2. You
okay.
couldn't find a 2-door very often.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I love that car. Many trips to Athens, Ohio in it. So it's a great car. And so anyways, so the company, the mechanic shop calls me and a bunch of stuff wrong with it. Like, what exactly do I need to get fixed to keep it safe?
Yeah.
You know, I don't plan on having this car an extended period of time. And the guy was like, you really need to get everything done. Like, I wouldn't feel comfortable giving this car back to you unless you get everything done.
Yeah.
I go, okay, well, how much is that going to run me? And he goes, parts and labor, you're looking at in between $2,500 and $3,000.
Yeah.
It's like the car's not even worth that at that
Yeah.
point in time. So I'm like, just give it back to me. He goes, do you want the oil change? I'm like, no, just give it back. So I came and got it. And like a week later, I took it to.
You know, it'd be funny if you got it and then you couldn't leave, like it was broken.
I know, right.
Like,
Yeah, that would have been ironic, wouldn't it? But it didn't happen. So like a week later, I took it to another place that was more of like a mom and pop type of shop,
Yep,
and
that's where I go.
In downtown Perrysburg, and it's no longer there. And so I took it in, same conversation with the owner. And oil change, and I know there's a bunch wrong with it. Just tell me what you think, and then let me know. And so same thing. A couple hours later, he calls me. He goes, "Yeah, you're right. There's stuff wrong with it. But you say you just drive it from your home to work." I said, "Yeah, that's it." He goes, "All right. Well, here's what I think you should do. And he rattles off a couple things for me. And I said, okay, how much is that going to cost me? He goes, parts, labor. How does $87 sound? I'm like, what?
$87.
87? He goes, not including the oil change. I'm like, yeah, just go ahead and do it then.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so I learned a lesson there. And So the car treated me well after that for a few years. Like I said, it served its purpose, and then it came time to
get a new Jeep.
To get a new Jeep, that I'm riding right now that I don't particularly like, but it is like for what we do. Like I use it just for work to and from, and it's now it's paid off, so we don't have a car payment on it, and
that's nice.
Yeah, so it's nice.
Yeah. It's did you like it when you bought it?
Well, I was kind of in a situation where I really needed a new car.
Okay.
I really couldn't go much longer, and it was before we had kids. It was before my administrative days as well too.
Yeah.
I mean, so I didn't have a whole lot of money either.
Yeah.
And I bought it at, I forgot what the dealership over in Oregon is, but they were running a deal, and it's a Jeep Compass, and obviously I like Jeep, have a lot of faith in that brand, and they're running a deal on it. And then I got just like this incredible interest rate.
Oh, nice.
With it. And so I bought it, and then within 5 years, the whole thing's paid off.
Yeah.
And
that's
so,
cool.
yeah, it was kind of like, it was hard to say no.
Yeah.
To that situation. And so got it and paid off now, and it's great.
If you could, not including like sports car, like super sports cars or anything, if you could get a vehicle, like what vehicle would you really want?
Yeah, it'd be a Wrangler.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
like I said, I'm not a car guy at all. My mom had that Wrangler for all those years.
Yeah.
My dad still has that 4-door, with it. So definitely, I'd like the kind of like the more the old like 2-door, soft top type of thing. But
have you seen the Wrangler that our wide receivers coach drives?
No, I haven't.
He has,
No.
it's a Gary drives
Yeah.
it's not every day. Like he bought it,
Yeah.
knowing that it needs a lot of work. And but yeah, it's every time he brings it, he never has anything on it. It's always open
Yeah.
air.
See, that's
Yeah.
exactly kind of like my dream scenario. And like my dream scenario with Lindsay, and she knows this. So this isn't a secret. Would be have kind of like that beater, Wrangler that
Yep.
just keep the top down all the time, and
Yeah.
in the wintertime kind of put in storage, but then have like a Grand Cherokee as like the everyday, type of car.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, what's funny as we're talking about cars is, Lindsay's got the Sequoia I drove over here, huge car, right?
Yeah.
It's got like the 3 rows with it's great for the girls and traveling and all that stuff, and it's like Lindsay knows I want the Wrangler or a Grand Cherokee. I know you used to have a Grand Cherokee
Yeah.
in school, and she's like, "What about the Wagoneer?" Yeah, I was like, "It makes no sense for us to have like 2
Too big.
gigantic cars like this,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and let alone the price tag on it, right?"
Yeah. I also don't think
And-
they look very good.
Yeah, and
Personally.
so she looked at one
Yeah.
like online, like not actually looked at.
Yeah.
She goes, I think I like this. I'm like, no, no, yeah, we're good with your Sequoia right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
yeah, Andrea's been. Well, we wanted a new car for Andrea. We've
Yeah.
leased. This is the 3rd car we've leased. Now we've bought out the lease and we're buying it now, or making payments now, because we try to get a car like right I think it was right after COVID, and it was like impossible to buy a car. And if we did, it was super expensive. So we just like, well, we'll just keep going with this lease, buy the lease out, and that's what we're doing. So we're looking at cars now, or kinda started because we're going to Arizona for spring break.
I heard spring training.
Yeah.
Saw Andrea the other day. She told me about it.
Oh yeah. She mentioned that. Yeah, and we use Turo to
Yeah.
get rental cars.
Yeah, I think she told me about that too.
Yeah, so we were looking at these like Tahoes, and,
Yeah.
and she's like, I'm gonna want one of these now. I said, yeah, I know, but like, I mean, we can eventually get you one, but it is. She hasn't, like I said, I like leasing.
Right.
My dad's like, if you're comfortable with always having a payment, then lease.
Yeah.
And I just always want her, because especially when the kids were little, I wanted her to have a dependable car,
Right.
and if something went wrong with it, we didn't have to pay for it, depending, right? So that's why I like doing it. But at some point, we'll get a gigantic SUV as well. So
Yeah, it's nice having this SUV. I mean, just like we don't drive to travel other than like driving up to like Lindsay's family and in Michigan, but it's still nice if we just throw everything, even just going like the airport, with the suitcases, and it's huge, right? So we
Yes.
just fit everything in there. It's works out well, but there's really no point in us having two vehicles like that, right? So
it's nice. Andrea has an SUV, and there's just constantly chairs in there for any type of outside game.
Yeah.
And then there's always like blankets and coats and
Right,
stuff for
right.
kids. Just like shed it, and then it stays in there.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
where's your coat? Probably in mom's car.
Yeah, right. It's fun. I've got like the girls don't travel with me very often, but like my car always has the car seats in there too. But
Yeah.
I just noticed the other day. I looked back and there's like stuffies. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here?
Just trash.
Yeah,
from snacks.
Yeah, I'm like, all right, this is my life. So
That's what my truck is. For the most part, every day. Like if we're all going together somewhere, we all go in there. So in the cup holders in the sides of the doors, there's just snack wrappers and toys and like and my kids are older and they're still like, why do we have these like toys from McDonald's in here?
Right.
Like that's just how it is.
So like, if I'll take the girls somewhere in my car, they'll ask like, hey, can I bring this? I'm like, no, you don't need this. It's my car toy. I need it. So I'm like, okay. So
what about the other 4 car toys in there?
Yeah,
right.
Now? That's the accumulation of all the stuff. Is we need a car toy. I'm like, okay. So
I didn't ask. What is there something you've been nerding out about lately?
yeah, it's a good question. No, I mean, you and I know each other so well.
Yeah.
The same stuff, obviously, with the ultimate relaxer for me to kind of decompress is, especially at this time of year, is getting obviously the Orioles baseball, spring training, and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a nice hat you got on too.
Yeah,
I like
right.
that one.
A little Angry Bird, icon there.
Yeah.
So that's always relaxing to me with that. We're working actually. Lindsay's done a great job because I'm not handy at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's 2 things. 1, I'm not handy. 2, like I don't have a whole lot of time.
Yeah.
to do things around the house. And 3, when I do something around the house, it usually doesn't go very well.
We've talked about this before.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've got a friend that's like super handy, and so they've been coming over and doing some work. So they've done and Lindsay's kind of coordinated. So we've had this like spare guest room upstairs, and that we're not using. But we wanted to make it a little bit more functional, other than kind of like a storage. And so like 3 or 4 years ago, my dad and I turned the closet into kind of like an office space for me. Kind of like you open up the doors, and then we put a countertop in there.
Is that where you used to, when we were podcasting through Zoom, would you sit in there?
Yeah, I think so, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, at some point in time. And then so I was able to decompress my basement that used to be like my area with like all the sports memorabilia, kind of like your basement, basically into this little closet in this spare room,
man.
right? And which is fine, because like we were talking about like moving, and I was like, we really like the location of our house, and some other things, and so let's just try to utilize our space a little differently. And so let's redo the basement and make that the girls' area, and which is great. So the room upstairs has kind of been unfunctional for a little bit, and so over the course of a couple of years, like we've repainted it, and then like Lindsay, found this great like sofa pull out that if we have guests, it easily pulls out into a bed. With it, and then we installed, and by we, our friend that came over and did it, like nice like a lighting system in there. But actually just 2 days ago, the next step in the project was we were turning into almost like a theater type of room. And so like we bought one of those like projectors that has like that you can like get the apps right in on it, right, and kind of load that in, and then you can just like show it on your wall. But then we've actually got one of those screens, and then so it comes down.
Oh,
like,
really?
Over, like, takes up the entire wall,
Yeah.
like over top the closet door,
That's
where
cool.
like a little office is right there. And so we're trying to make that into a little more of a functional room with that, with the idea of
That's cool.
Being able to watch movies in there, or the baseball games, the football games, whatever it might be. So just kind of seeing that stuff come together has been kind of cool. Like I said, I've had zero part in it.
Hey, you know what? When
I will use it though.
if you are paying, I think you can say we.
Yeah, right. So it's I don't exactly know what we're paying for either. So it's the plus of having a financial advisor as a spouse. You gotta trust them with the money decisions. People are listening like, Scott don't do anything around there. So, So that I mean, it's been kind of cool, kind of like the process of how the house is kind of coming together into like the way we want it to be.
I've learned that never ends.
Yeah, no, it won't, and it won't. I mean, I think that's kind of like the cool thing. Is,
just always morphing into something else.
Yeah, morphing into like what functionally like fits your needs at that time, and so that's been pretty good. I tell you what, I really nerded out over a book I read recently.
I was gonna ask you. I know you read a lot of books.
Yeah, I'm always constantly reading. So there's this book. I gave it actually to a couple different people to read. Probably top 5 book I've ever read, called The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter.
Okay.
So I've been kind of following Michael Easter's work for a little while through his the free edition of his like blog that he has. He's got like a paid and a free version, right? So obviously with the paid one you get a lot more with it, but the free one you still get some pretty good stuff. And initially I started reading and kind of following his work because he was a big proponent of rucking as like the best exercise, like bang for your buck exercise.
And rucking is like hiking, but with like
with
backpacks
weight, with weight, And he had done some research about it and was a big proponent for it, and in terms of like being outside and carrying weight, in terms of like a natural evolution of the human body, like that's what your body's supposed to do, right? And then so there's a colleague at work with me who is part of that F3 group.
It's in the morning. They hike around,
right? The Sylvania branch of it. And so like him and I were just having a conversation, and so they ruck all the time. And so he had given me his pack to try for a few days. So I tried it for a few days in the fall. I was like, pretty good. I like it.
How much weight did you put in there?
30 pounds.
Okay.
Yeah, 30 pounds with it. And so then I'm like, okay, so I had that experience, but then also kind of like following the author a little bit. So his book came out, bought his book. And, the thing I liked about the book was the content of it was great, but the craftsmanship of how he pulled the book together was beautiful. I mean, so to give you the background on it, he's a recovering alcoholic. Alcoholism ran in his family, and he was a writer for Men's Health as a career. And so he had access to a lot of different professionals and experts in the field of men's nutrition, obviously, or just nutrition in general and health in general. And so he made a decision, and I can't recall the details, that he was going to get sober, and got sober, and he felt almost like a hypocrite because he's writing for Men's Health with all these great things to do, but then he wasn't taking care of himself, right?
Okay.
And so the book is staged by him giving you some background about like who he was first, and now he's a professor at UNLV. He lives out in Vegas. Still writes for Men's Health and some other magazines, and but also like kind of like the growth of his journey. And one of the things that he got really obsessive about was his own health and what works, what does science say work, and what are the best practices to all together. And so, one of the things that he came across with individuals that he worked with was this Japanese term called, and I'm probably missaying it, I think it's like misogi, maybe. And it's a challenge. Basically, what that is a challenging outdoor adventure that really pushes your limits. As again, those things could look different, based on your setting, your environment, who you are, and all these different things. And so he had done some, little ones like in the deserts in Vegas and things like that, and then it partnered up with somebody and said, hey, like if you really want one, come with me to our next one in the Arctic.
Oh, geez.
And so the book basically is a summary of their trip to the Arctic, where they had to, fly to Anchorage and then take the little private jet to, the uppermost point of Alaska, and they just dropped him and two other guys there for 3 months.
3 months?
I think it was 3 months. And so they brought enough of like the typical food to get it, but they knew at some point that they were going to be reliant on hunting caribou in order to survive. And so the book then goes through like their whole type of journey in the Arctic and hunting this pack of caribou. And the two hunters that he were with are like spiritual hunters, and they were only going to hunt and kill a certain type of caribou. It's got to be a male, older, piece of it. They're not going to kill a female. They're not going to kill a younger one because they're still going to contribute to the herd. So they've got to target the older male one that's kind of moving on, right? Type of thing. And so, as he documents it, he talks about like being outside and the hiking and the natural hazards they have, and they're in this wilderness that's man hasn't touched, and kind of going through this with the grizzly bears and the birds of prey and all these different things. And so, as the focal point of the story of that, he then ties in all these different individual lessons of nutrition and health and spiritual growth based on all the science that he had collected as his time as a editor for Men's Health. So then after something happens on the journey, he was able to tie in, okay, what does the science say about that? And then he talks about his trip to Japan to meet with Buddhist monks about spirituality and what he learned from the Buddhist monks and how that relayed to the misogi in the Arctic, and then nutritional values and then what he learned from the scientists at Harvard or Stanford and how that applies there. So it was really great. Not only it's informative and and like with bang for your buck exercise and how to live a natural type of thing, but just the craftsmanship of the book altogether was just great. So definitely something I gave to a couple of people that I knew would nerd out about it a little bit. And
that goes like the information in a book, especially a book like that, can really attract somebody, right? When you're reading it, like, oh, there's all the information's cool. But it really attracts more people when you say like, how is it composed in the book? Because it could be a totally different book.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, it could just been a story about a trip to the Arctic,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and that in itself would have been a great read, with it. But the fact that he was able to kind of take all these different things that he had already had access to, with his profession and his job, and had the science behind it, to how this like helps human beings as a whole, right? It was great. And so basically, like, the premise of the book, it's called The Comfort Crisis. Like, one of the underlying themes was, in human evolution, there's been a lot of positives, with it, but one of the negatives is the species as a whole is too used to being comfortable.
Yeah.
And so actually our bodies are deteriorating more because of a lack of discomfort and the challenging things. And one of the examples he uses throughout the book is, exercise is such a great thing, right? But even when most people exercise, they do it in a 72-degree air conditioning gym, as opposed to going outside, where there's a lot of research and a lot of science behind. You have a lot more significant benefits of exercising outside with the natural air and the endorphins from the trees and the oxygen levels and all these different things, and being uncomfortable in colder weathers and things like that. And so so a lot of that's kind of like the premises of the title, The Comfort Crisis, is like there's a lot of crises going on, but part of it is because human beings have now been used to, and
they've been trained to
be
easy.
to be as easy as possible, right? Like one of the analogies he uses kind of constantly is, you go to the airport and you've got the stairs, you got the escalator, and everybody's on the escalator, nobody's on the stairs, type of thing, because we always look for the easy thing to do.
Hey man, I got luggage.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, right? Yeah, hey man. So, but yeah, so it was great read. It was awesome.
So I get recommendations from books from two sources, and usually I at least poke into them from you and from podcasts I listen to. That's how I find books, especially like any sports books. When they have like Ryan Russillo on his podcast, where have authors on and stuff. He really likes history. History's not my jam so much. But it sounds very interesting.
So I get almost all my book references now actually from the Ryan Hawk podcast.
Oh, do you?
So that's how I think I got kind of in tune to Michael Easter. He was on his podcast not too long ago, but I think Ryan Hawk had mentioned him earlier a couple of years ago, and that's how I kind of got to his blog a little bit. But like the Ryan Hawk podcast, like that's like my central source of like professional development. Is like all of his guests are on, and then I typically check out their books, and that leads to another, and it all kind of gets centered right back to him. So
that's cool, man. I at this point, you would have listened to this at this point, but on the things I learned this week, I was listening to a podcast about food. I think the title is Radiolab, and title was Forever Fresh. It was talking about food and how to preserve food and everything, and it was really cool, and how they explained why salad is in bags now, and it's not just a plastic bag. It's specifically designed to prevent the lettuce in the bag from like spoiling. And then they talked about how we do some things unnecessary, like soy milk doesn't need to be refrigerated. But if it's not refrigerated, people are weird about it because they're used to their milk being cold, and that's the way it's got to be. That's
like it's how it's always been done, right? It's got to go that route. So,
and they're working on meat, there's some big companies that are coming out with meat you don't have to refrigerate.
Really?
Which again is weird because you're used to it, right? And so they are working with restaurants now to be like, hey, check this out, because then they can advertise like, hey, you've been eating unrefrigerated meat for a year. But even then, like, it's a weird thing.
I'll let that go to trial first, right?
But a lot of these things people are afraid of because it's like the soy milk, right? It should be cold, and like the stuff they spray. Not the current waxy stuff you spray on apples, but there's these other things they're learning that they can spray on where all it is fats, that you can consume. There's no calories. It's just fats, and that's what preserve these. But people are freaked out, understandably so, when seemingly chemicals are getting sprayed on their
new,
food.
Right? Yeah. Lindsay and I did a master class on the gut biome that you have, and gut health in general. I know it's kind of like a hot topic here. Last couple of years, and so that whole process was fascinating. She's got her own the garden over at the with the city outside on Roach Road there, and they talked about how important your gut health was, and to how much of the relation between your gut health, your heart health, and your brain health, all that kind of works together, and it really kind of centers within the whole gut, making sure like your biome isn't out of whack. But there's like natural things you can do to make sure like the bacteria, like the healthy bacteria that needs to be in there stays in there.
Yeah.
With it, so like we've read a lot about that, and Lindsay's gotten into that a little bit, and but yeah, just it's a different way to like look at food, you know, a little bit, and so it's been fascinating.
With that, when you were reading the other book you were just talking about when when they dropped them off in the Arctic or doing these stuff, is any of that stuff for you like, you know what, I think I might want to try that?
Yeah, initially you're like, yeah, right, and then I'm like, realistically, no. I mean,
I know you're not a hunter.
Yeah,
but maybe you go with a hunter.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you think about like how cool that'd be, and talk about like a challenge of what you can do, and then you start, and this is like one of the points of the book was like do things that are hard, right? And then but his other pieces, but just don't die doing them. And so I was like, well, I mean, going out to the Arctic, and I mean, obviously I'm not a strong swimmer. I mean, that might be okay. But then like you start thinking about
just each different layer of
what could happen, right? And especially for me, you know, not to, with my autoimmune disease that I have with the claudius, so I'm like, okay, what if something happens there, right? And I cut myself and I bleed, and then like you're stuck there, you can't get out because like they had coordinated with the flight on this day, the pilot's going to come back to this spot, right?
Yeah.
And pick you up. And so I'm like, I don't know necessarily if I would want to do something like that, but also at the same time, it's not necessarily that, but it's the mindset of, okay, what can I do that's physically challenging for me?
Yeah.
That's more practically maybe safe, for me here locally. With that. So it does kind of change your mindset with like maybe how you attack your, exercise routine, or that type of thing. But it's more of like a broader type of thing with, taking the challenging route, when you can, don't seek for the easy thing, which I think is, something that humans are kind of tied to, conditioned to do right now.
Yeah. What do you think the hardest thing you've ever done?
Yeah, I don't know.
As I was thinking about that question,
that's a great question, right?
I couldn't either. I guess physically or mentally. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's there's a couple situations with my my employment that was challenging. That that was a mental toughness, mental grind on different things, and from a physical standpoint, I don't know if this is exactly like what you're looking for, but like going back to in 2012 when I had that first really bad blood clot.
Yeah.
Right. And I think you and I were coaching together that year,
correct,
if I remember correctly.
Yep.
That was kind of a mindset shift that was mental, and it was also physical, because the realization of I was not taking care of myself like set in, right? And it's
and what's crazy, sorry to cut you off, but what's crazy is like you say you weren't taking care of yourself, but it's not like you were 300 pounds. Like you look at you and you're like, yeah, Scott's in shape.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure you're working out at some level.
Yeah,
right?
At that point, like I really wasn't doing a whole lot, right? And I was staying up late, and staying up late, not getting a lot of sleep. That was at that point, Lindsay and I weren't married yet. It's like the nutritional habits weren't necessarily there, because I credit her for the nutritional part of it. The exercise, the physical piece of it wasn't necessarily there yet. And then, so like that moment happened, and I remember, being released from the hospital and having to follow up with the doctor, and basically said, hey, listen, you got, like, not to say anything's bad right now, but at the same time, you got to take care of yourself a little bit, because I mean, you're going to be prone to, we're going to put you on the medicine and stuff, but like, you got to get your, like, I remember he said this, you got to make sure you get your blood flowing a little bit. You got to pick up that a little bit. That's going to help. And that's kind of what started, a few weeks later, so it's clear. That's when, I started lifting weights again, in the mornings with Cotterman, and some kids were starting to come in with us, and then it's kind of carried ever since. So, and it's like, but it's not to say that, I'm sitting there, having these super intense workouts or whatever it is. It's more like the mental, the mental toughness of, making sure that you're consistent with different things,
Yeah,
right? Everything.
yeah.
It means, you and I are going to be 40 here in the next couple of weeks together, right? So, like, we're not trying to make it to the NFL on different things, but it's that consistency of doing things on a regular basis. And getting up early is hard, right? I mean, getting up early is hard. That's what, Coach Krieg would always say with the kids, the 6 a.m. workouts when we were coaching together is it's hard to get up and do this stuff. And so I think that's a lot of it. So I said that's maybe some physical and mental, but I don't know if there's anything else that's like super hard. I think the hard is just being consistent and disciplined in what you do.
I think when I asked that question, I thought that's what you might say.
Yeah.
Because it is a more mentally than physically, but even physically is stuff you are can't control at that moment when you're laying in a hospital bed, right?
Yeah, right.
Your body is like doing something that you're like, shit,
yeah,
this is crazy.
What's going on here, right?
Yeah. So that's part of it too. It's like, there is something physical happening, but the mental part of it is hard too,
so it's kind of like intertwined a little bit with intertwined with that stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably it. But like, I can't, like, I'm not. It's not like people are dropping me off in a, the Arctic or the desert or with that. I mean, that piece of it. So
I just don't know if anybody ever sits and be like, "What's the hardest thing I've ever done?"
Yeah,
and then I guess you think about it. Like for me, I was like, I don't know. I don't know the hardest thing I've done. And if I were to say something, it might sound like, I don't know, I did that 3K or that 5K one time. Like, all right, well, so did a 9-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, but it was hard for me, point. I guess. I don't know.
I think there's. I mean, I think hard is like dependent on your situation with a lot of things, right? Yeah. I mean, you go ask the guy who wrote that book, what's the hardest thing you ever done, and I would imagine the first thing he would say was going cold turkey from alcohol.
Sure. Yeah.
Right, and then that opened the gateway to some of this other stuff that he did. Right. I remember, a halftime speech that Coach Kriegel gave one year when I was assistant. I don't know if you were there or not. And he was talking about, how, Perrysburg kids sometimes have a inaccurate reputation of being tough. Mm-hmm. And he talked about, don't tell me about us not being tough. And I believe Jimmy Reddick was on that team that year. And he had mentioned, the Reddick family, and what happened with their dad.
Yeah.
When they were children. And, he goes, we're tough. And so, like, I think everybody's situation is a little bit different, with what tough is, and what brought you there, and what's hard and what's not hard. And so that's a deep question, right?
Well, you answered it wonderfully.
Yeah, thanks.
I was thinking too, what's very difficult, and I think it's you don't notice it as much because you live through it every day, is just being a parent.
Yeah.
Right. Being a parent, it's one of those things where if you like let your body go for so long, you're getting used to it, and then at the end you realize like, oh shit, I wasn't doing it correctly.
Right.
Same thing with being a parent. Is like you think you're going on this track, right?
Yeah.
And then at some point you're like, wait, we probably shouldn't have done this.
Yeah.
It could be 12 years from now or whatever, right?
But yeah, I mean, so you'll learn. I mean, part of it too is like you're like how you conduct yourself is so important because your kid's always watching what you do.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so in terms of like, once again, things that are hard, and it's even from a parenting standpoint. I mean, if your kids are watching, I mean, so like you're on the pedestal at all times, right? And you may not think they're watching, but they are watching, and different things. And even at Alice, who's 6, will cite things that either Lindsay and I did previously, and I'm like, how do you remember? Like, how do you remember that?
Yeah.
And so it all kind of sits right there. So I think that's another thing about being hard is it's hard being a parent.
You have a camera on you all the time.
You do. Yeah. It's like this like sponge.
Yeah.
That just it's almost like a personal, social media feed that just like replays you at all times.
And a lot of times it tells you the worst things you've done or said.
Right. And yeah, so
I used to have a joke where Lillian was with me one time, and I had I don't say it was an argument, but this lady, I was backing into a spot, and Lillian was probably like 5, maybe.
Yeah.
I was backing into a spot, and this woman like honked my horn.
Yeah.
Or honked her horn.
Right.
That'd have been weird. She honked my horn. Yeah. Honked her horn because she thought I was getting too close, which I have a camera. I can see where I'm at, whatever.
Right.
And I get out and kind of say something to her, and then we go our way.
Yeah.
So later on that night at dinner, Lillian's like, Dad yelled at a woman today.
Yeah,
like, I didn't yell at her. But that's what they see. Like, that's
So we have I'm sure this has happened to me too, but I can't think of something off the top of my head. But, a few years ago, I think Alice was she must have been like 3 or 4 maybe. And I think she was driving with Lindsay's mom. And I think a car cut in front of her or something like that. And Lindsay's mom was like, "Come on, lady." And so, I don't know, a couple weeks later, we're driving and a car, and Lindsay's like, "Oh," and then Alice is like, "Come on, lady." So we're just kind of looking, we're like, "Okay, where'd that come from?"
Yeah, man, it's I don't think about it consciously of like, all right, I'm a parent, and this is what I do. The only time I think about it is when in my brain I did something I probably shouldn't have done,
right.
Or I raised my voice, or I could have handled that better. Like, it's always like, I never think about, you know what? I was a good dad in that moment.
I know, right? Yeah, you don't think about that, and and you don't think about that either. I mean, like in my line of work too, right? I mean, there's a situation, talk about like modeling behavior, right?
Yeah.
Which is hard, and you have to, sometimes recognize that you may have made a mistake. And there's a situation earlier this year, actually, the first day of school. Teo might remember this, where it was the welcome assembly, for our students, and a couple of kids were sitting in the early row, and they weren't necessarily representing the way they needed to as I was trying to present, and so I got on them a little bit, and day one, right? I don't know who these kids are, and that happens.
Yeah.
And so I remember I need to find out who these kids are, and so I eventually found out who the kids were and brought them in, and you apologize and say, hey, this is, apologize. Probably wasn't the best way for me to approach that. However, that's not my expectation, and that's not our expectation of how we start things.
Yeah.
In an auditorium, and and I cite this video. I don't know if you and I have talked about the Lucas Patrick, Aaron Rodgers video.
I don't know
at all about this. So years ago, when Rodgers was playing with Green Bay, they had a lineman named Lucas Patrick, who was kind of like your journeyman lineman, kind of like the 6th or 7th guy, on the team. Mm-hmm. And so he had an opportunity to play in a game and like meaningful minutes, and on the national broadcast, he had missed an assignment or something, and all you see is on the sideline, Rodgers just, irate at him, mm-hmm. and just yelling at him, and getting his face, and things like that. And then so the following Monday or Tuesday or whatever it was, the Lucas Patrick is at his locker doing a post game or interview or something, and they asked him, like, what did it feel like that you have the 3-time MVP or whatever it was on national television?
Yeah.
Get into you like that. Mm-hmm. And he said, it's sad that that's all you guys saw, because what you don't see is all the stuff that happens before and after that moment. And then so he said, everybody has, kind of like an emotional bank account, with this. And then you either make a withdrawal or you make a deposit into that emotional bank account with every human that you work with and you interact with. And he goes, the important thing is, if you're going to make a withdrawal out of it, that you have already made deposits into it to afford that withdrawal. And if you make that withdrawal, that you do something afterwards to continue to deposit more money into that. And he said, what you guys don't see is you didn't see the work leading up to that week and all these positive deposits that Aaron Rodgers had made into my emotional bank account about encouraging me, showing me confidence, all these different things that he has built up with all of us. So when there is a position where we need to be corrected or if we need to be chewed out, he can do that with us because he's already built up that relationship with us and that emotional bank account. He can afford to make that withdrawal with us. And he goes, so that moment always kind of resonated with me a little bit with, especially working with kids. Like in that particular moment, day one, I don't have any deposits in the emotional bank account with that kid.
Yeah.
And so even though I was sharing with some of the staff, I said, I made a withdrawal without having money in my account. So I need to go make sure I make a deposit right now. And so I think that's kind of like an interesting thing. And you think about that with your kids too.
Yeah.
Right. So there's times where you probably get on your kids a little bit, but if all they get is the withdrawals and they don't get the deposits, that could be a problem. Right. And so I think that's important.
And then what are those? And then you think to like, what do those look like? What do deposits look like? Like yesterday, Mateo went with me to my basketball game. Yeah. We chatted a little bit. We shot baskets, before the game. We were just shooting around, and then he was standing with me when they were warming up, and then he went in the stands. And then afterward, we were joking and laughing about something. And I think and by you saying that, I was like, all right, it wasn't something like in that instance with the kids, you had to go do that because you knew exactly what happened. In this instance, I don't know that that's what I'm doing, right? Because I'm just a dad. I'm just talking to my kid, but subconsciously somewhere it's like, this is building up that account.
But I think too, even in your role as the leader at the Metro Parks, the same philosophy with your staff, right? Too.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, you have to kind of go in there with your staff and build them up, build their confidence, have those deposits with them a little bit because I think you told a story not too long ago where I think it may have been when we went to San Diego where they messed up and you're like, I'm going to rail them when I get back, type of thing. And I told them before you left.
Before I left, yes.
Right. And then I think after the San Diego trip, I'd reached out like, well, how'd it go? And you had said, they took accountability and it went well, they understood, and now we move forward. But part of that is because you had that moment, where you have to, I don't want to say like yell, but you have to have an honest conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's received away because you've already got those deposits in with your crew.
Yeah.
With it too. So I think that's a great example about just like your leadership style as a whole, right?
Yeah, and there's some staff members who require more frequently the deposits, and there's some that don't need as much. And then you learn that, right?
Yeah,
you have to learn that too, and
you learn how to navigate that. For sure.
And sometimes you feel that okay, what does it matter? What does it matter if I say good job this time? Or if I don't say anything, it doesn't benefit me from not saying anything, and it's just a couple words. It's like when I tell people to subscribe to the podcast. Yeah. It doesn't hurt you at all,
right?
To just hit that little bell, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it doesn't hurt me at all to say, "Hey, great job on that," or talk to a seasonal and be like, "Hey, how did learning go from this person?" And I say the same thing, like, "All right, you taught them well," or whatever.
But it's also, I think you can kind of have the conversation about, you talked about one of the things I learned about saying thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's take that scenario and let's take it to, maybe it's a local place near Perrysburg. Maybe it's like Swig or something like that. And you always go there, you kind of know the people and you kind of say, thank you. And those little things are deposits into the bank account there. Like, what happens? Okay. On the day that you have, poor service or something goes wrong or whatever it is, all that stuff is all those deposits have been made, right? Yeah. So then it's like a better interaction, better treatment of the resolution of what potentially could be a conflict, just doing that. So I think like the things I learned, that thank you thing kind of plays right in this as well too. Like all those things are deposits that you can make. So
and let's be fair, if something goes wrong at a restaurant, I'm not saying anything anyway. So.
Right.
Unless it is, and you're alluding to that, the relationship is there where you're like, hey, you're my server every time, or I talk to the manager every time, or whatever.
Right. Right.
There was a time I went to a restaurant over by my work, and it was Andrea and I. She met me for lunch, and we were going to order the cheese sticks, and she's like, all right. She brought them to us and goes, and she said, because we've had her before, she's like, I just want to let you know, let me know how these are, because they don't look right, and we've had some issues with them, but just let me know.
Yeah.
And we ate them, and I told Andrew, I was like, I probably wouldn't have thought of anything.
Right.
But she said this to
Yeah.
us. So we did tell her, like, I mean, we told her that same thing. Like, we don't think anything's wrong with her. Maybe if anything, they're a little overcooked, but other than that, they're fine.
Yeah.
But to have for her to be like, hey, check this out, please,
Right.
because we've been having issues.
Right. I mean, it's great.
It's
great.
fun to have those little relationships
Yeah, for
sprinkled
sure.
all over the place.
Yeah, for sure.
And sometimes they're very beneficial. Like when I was in college and I worked at Hungry Howie's, and I gave Mr. Freeze free pizza one time, and I got free ice cream all summer.
Oh, nice. That worked out well.
Yeah, that was bringing anybody. Like, hey, there's like 3 of us, and they just gave us free ice cream. So that was good. That was a good
awesome.
relationship. Just be nice to people.
Do they have like your picture in like the inside booth there? Like this guy always gets free ice cream. It's always on us.
That'd be sweet. That'd be sweet. I think I just made sure I always went to the same person or same 2 people.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Before we go, are you a big NBA guy?
A little bit. I was a little. I tell
the
you
big
what.
trade?
I woke up this morning, saw the big trade, and the first thing I thought was, "What's Jimmy Hutchinson's reaction?"
100%.
So, do you have one for me? Do you have a reaction from Jim on this one?
So
That's the only thing I could think of is what's Jimmy thinking right now.
So I first of all, I saw it this morning, and it was still pretty early in Texas, so I didn't text Jim. So I texted Tyler though, and I said, "What do you think Jimmy's spin is going to be on this?" Because Jimmy always has some sort of spin,
Of course,
right?
of course.
I mean, he says LeBron James isn't a top 10 basketball player, so
Of all time.
of all time.
Okay.
Exactly. So I thought there may be some spin there from Jimmy. So I did have a couple like, all right, what do you think Jim's spin is on this? And I said Luka wasn't that good, and I said something about LeBron.
Luka can't play defense.
LeBron can't
defensive
win.
liability.
LeBron can't win without a top 5 player, or something like that. But then I texted Jim and I said, "Jim, you good?" He goes, "No." And then he did the meme of Adam Sandler's character saying, "Somebody kill me, please."
So I don't pay attention to NBA very often, but like I kind of thought Anthony Davis was like, isn't he pretty old on the verge of retirement?
Older. Yeah, he's
I mean,
older.
isn't like he's not the player he used to be, right?
No, he is definitely not.
And how old's Luka?
Lucas, I believe, is 25.
Oh my gosh! Like
I believe. Yeah,
any
Anthony
other,
Davis is 31.
Any other pieces coming back to Dallas on this, or what?
Not enough. So I listened to an emergency podcast, they call it, for Bill Simmons and Ryan Russillo, one other guy, and they said the Mavs got Anthony Davis, a player, and then 2029 first round draft pick. That's what they got.
They didn't get Bronny.
No.
All right.
There was a joke about that, though. And they said they had texted all their contacts in NBA.
Yeah.
Nobody even knew that he was available.
Yeah.
So you would think, all right, we're trying to trade Luka. We would tell everybody in the
Right.
world so you get the best package.
Yeah.
And I'm a Spurs fan. They were talking about the Spurs, and they go, if I was the Spurs, I would say you can have anybody except Wembanyama.
Right.
Right? So no one understands why they kept everything quiet and decided just to go
I
with
saw
the Lakers.
the Dallas owner said something to the effect of like, defense wins championships. He doesn't. We need
There's
defense.
their GM.
Or the GM.
Nico Collins, I think. That was their GM where he said that. Like, sure, guy.
Yeah.
In the NBA where everyone shoots 3-pointers and the
I
score
like
is 140.
on the ESPN app, they were showing all the videos of the NBA players like finding out about the trade like during timeouts, and they're all like,
Yes.
"What?"
That's I don't and they said, and they're right, that there a couple days later there's always here's what was wrong with Luka article or whatever.
Right.
So that's going to come out,
Yeah, who knows? He could have been. He could have said, I don't know what his contract's like. Maybe he's a free agent or something.
Well, they didn't want to give him the big contract. So the big contract is like 5 years, $350 million or something like that. And that's what they said. Part of that was they didn't want to give him that. I was like, what? He's like a top 3 NBA player. Why would you want to give him that?
Is that up after them this year?
I think so. I'd have to look.
Yeah.
But possibly. But now that he got traded, it cost him money because he can't. The NBA has, if you're with your team, you get this supermax contract.
Yep.
If you get traded and aren't with the team that drafted you,
Yeah.
or aren't with so many years, then you get less than that.
Okay.
So he can still get a max contract. It's just less money.
So he's pissed.
What's the difference between 350 and 300? I don't
Yeah.
know, but
50.
But, well, it's literally
That's what it is. 50 million.
but more because Texas doesn't have income tax. So I don't know.
Hey man, with the national spotlight for the Lakers.
Yeah, it just seems it was such a weird thing. Like and everyone felt the same way. Like, oh, this is fake, right? This isn't true. Oh, it's April 1st, not February 1st, right? So it was pretty wild, and Jimmy's quite upset. So
You doing okay? No.
Yeah, just no.
Does he have a Luka jersey?
Oh, I'm sure his kids have Luka jerseys. His wife is a huge Mavs fan. So yeah.
Did Jimmy become a Mavs fan because his wife was a Mavs fan?
Jimmy was he was a Mavs fan in high school.
Was he?
Yes.
I don't remember us really ever talking about NBA too much.
We didn't do a lot of NBA in high school, but his grandparents lived in Texas.
Yeah, I knew there was associations with Texas. So.
Now, what he did become is a Texas A&M fan.
Yeah,
His
wife went there, right?
Yeah. So, but no, he's been a Mavs fan for a while. So, it was wild news.
Love
wild
to see a Dallas Laker Western Conference Finals.
Oh, that'd be hilarious. Oh my gosh.
Luka hits the game winner right over Anthony Davis, like posterizes Anthony Davis.
Oh man. Well, Scott. One more thing before we go to. I did text Gary what year his Jeep was, and he said 1994.
Oh, beautiful.
And he said,
I want that thing already.
Nice. You got to mention what a piece of shit mine is. Because I always used to make fun of him.
Yeah.
It is not. I don't even know if he takes it on the highway. I'm sure he does.
Yeah.
But it is very old and very much a piece of shit. But he likes it, and it drives fine. And
our neighbors in the cul-de-sac have they have like three children, 2 boys and a girl, and they're all now in college, and so they have a Wrangler, and they know that I want one, and so they texted Lindsay and said, "Hey, we're selling it.
Oh, really?
We'll give Scott first opportunity on this."
Yeah.
And this was like in the fall.
Yeah.
So she tells me, and I'm like, it just makes no sense at all right now.
Yeah, that's why I didn't buy the car that I wanted to buy.
Yeah, I mean, my car's in, like I said, it's good. I drive it from here to there.
Yeah.
You know, there's Justin, who's a central office administrator. Him and I share the same love for a Jeep Wrangler. He pulled the trigger and got one.
Did he?
And drove it over to the junior high for a couple weeks ago. It's like, is that it? Goes, that's it. And I'm like, oh man.
I know. I had the chance to buy a 1985 Monte Carlo SS.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yep. And I just same thing. Like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Right now, and I'm just gonna be putting money into this thing.
Lindsay is just like, it just doesn't make sense with the girls, with both of them having car seats, and at this point, when they're older, yeah. And so I'm like, well, like I have no car payment on this car right now.
Yeah.
I mean, so
at some point, will you buy one?
At some point, I will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will. Probably when the girls are older and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Scott, I was going to look up do you know how many times you've been on this podcast by any chance? It's got to be like 7 or 8, right?
Not exactly. I was going to say 6.
Maybe
it's 7.
I'm going to see. Sometimes if I just type your name in, it comes up with all the episodes.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
How much is it? Do I get a T-shirt or something?
So I'm working on something like that. So your first episode was episode 27.
Okay.
January 28th, almost exactly 4 years ago. January 28th, 2021. That was your first episode.
Wow.
And so you have been on. There's been a good Scott Buker run here. So I'm just going to go through the episodes. 27, 48, 73, 92, 110, 137, 164, 211, 234, and now 246. So including this one, it is. This is your 10th episode.
No way.
10th episode.
No way.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Take that, Ben Marshall.
10 times, man. And,
Wow.
and every time, and I'm sure I'll get it, our friend George always just has glowing reviews for when you're on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, George. Appreciate it. I did like the live call-in George had on your...
He just so happened to call while I'm doing things.
I need your thoughts on this joke.
That was good. That was good. So
I wonder if I could time up every time you do that.
That just... I thought about that too. I was like, that'd be cool if like he called, but I do so early in the morning that he'd have to wake up at like 5 in the morning.
It's the time changer.
Yeah. So congratulations, Scott. I didn't even realize there was that many.
I definitely
10 times.
Yeah, that's T-shirt worthy.
Yeah, I am working on something.
Rex and Mindy, but beyond that,
I've been working with Lexi Marshall too about using her She has like
Oh, yeah.
engravers and 3D
Yeah, yeah.
printers and that kind of stuff.
Yep,
So
yep.
we'll come up with something. So
Cool, man.
All right, man. Well, thanks for always wanting to
Thanks.
come on and have
Always
a
a
good
pleasure.
conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for downloading this episode of the Nerdball Podcast. If you want to reach out or be on the show, just search the Nerdball Podcast on any social media. If you want to email us, that is thenerdballpodcast@gmail.com. And of course, there's always YouTube, so you can go on there, subscribe to the Nerdball Podcast, and watch the podcast every week. As always, thanks to Real JP Multimedia, Cuddlefish Graphics, Big Daddy Graphics, and Perrysburg Junior High STEM Lab for always supporting the podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.